I feel the strongest thing is always if it happened in your body or in someone's body. That's enormous. A worm, a worm in some, yeah, a worm in a living body. Oh.
You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Perfect organism.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
This thing rules. This thing rules.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Brian Altano.
And I'm Max Scoville.
This is a show where we discuss something we love,
Unpack why we love it,
explain where it came from,
try to remember our first impressions of it,
share our weird stories about it,
maybe learn something new about it along the way.
but first and foremost, we're here to celebrate the fact that this thing rules.
In space, no one can hear you scream, or really do anything else for that matter, because there's no air. But in the summer of 1979, a lot of people did all sorts of screaming and vomiting and stuff in movie theaters when Ridley Scott's infamous haunted house in space, Alien, premiered. And it rules.
Yeah, so I'm glad you were clear from right off out the gate, because this is about the movie Alien. Or I guess the alien from Alien, who her name is Xenomorph, or his name, I guess.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Xenomorph.
Yeah. So not just the idea of an alien.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the first movie, right?
Yeah, I know, but one day, like if we do an episode called Aliens Rule, like we did an episode called Monsters Rule,
right.
I want to make it abundantly clear to our listeners that episode could be about the James Cameron sequel Aliens, but it also could be about the general concept of aliens in pop culture and maybe in space for real.
Well, the confusing thing is that like Alien and Aliens are the same franchise, but they are completely disparate films.
Yes.
Like they are different, different animals, so to speak. Different. I mean, they've been framed as different carnival rides. Like whereas like Ridley Scott's was a haunted house, James Cameron's is a roller coaster. Like they very much have like described them like that. But Ridley Scott's kicked it all off.
It's like the difference between having like a one dog and then the dogs that keep running into the house to eat the turkey from A Christmas Story, right? That's the difference between those two movies. Like one dog on its own, it's kind of a problem. Right? But when you have a whole bunch of dogs, it's a problem, right? Like with 20, 30 dogs, how many dogs do you think are in Aliens? I mean, there's one dog in Alien 3, but I'm saying
use the. I mean, yeah. What,
metaphorically,
okay. Let's back. Okay, what? Okay, there is.
I love to break you like once every 6 months.
You do that periodically. I wanted to talk about Alien 3, but you were like, I need to rewatch that, and I was like, you don't though.
No, Alien. I don't need to rewatch Alien 3. Alien. No, you wanted to do an episode about Terminator 2, and I said that's the one I should rewatch.
We can do that another. We're not doing a great start to this episode. Let's talk about the goddamn Alien. Okay, so when's the first time you saw this movie?
Spaceballs.
All right, fair enough. That's
my
valid answer.
My first exposure to Alien was through Spaceballs. Like I think a lot of people not necessarily weren't allowed to watch Alien, but my understanding was that Alien wasn't on TV all the time like other movies were. I feel like even back then in the 80s and the 90s, the MPAA or whatever the fuck were the FTC, they were like, we can't just show Alien willy-nilly at like 7:30 on AMC or whatever.
That's a good point. I feel like they showed it on the Sci-Fi Channel once in a while.
Yeah, eventually, yeah. Once like the Sci-Fi Channel started spinning up and stuff like that. But in terms of just like turning on the TV and stumbling upon a movie, you'd get Die Hard a lot, you get Terminator a lot. Those were sort of like traditionally violent films. In America, we love traditionally violent films. When the guy gets shot, or he shoots the guy, or he shoots a lot of the guys, and there's blood and there's stabbing, that's okay. Right?
Also, like Aliens, I love it. Alien is not a crowd pleaser. I mean, it was a crowd pleaser, but in terms of like watching it, like I love it dearly. I think it is a phenomenal work of art. But in terms of rewatchability, I think Aliens trumps it left and right. And it's, in the same way that like going to a haunted house is like the first time it scares the shit out of you, and on repeat, visits, you're kind of like, okay, this is the part where it jumps out, and everything. Like I don't know, I love this movie. When people are like, which is better, Alien or Aliens? I think that is a simpleton's question, because that's like what's better, pizza or sushi? Like it's
Yeah,
so drastically different.
They're different beasts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same beast, different
But
movie.
it's also, there are like long periods of nothing happening. Like it is a slow movie. And I mean, even by like old movie standards, where I know some people watch an old movie like, this is boring. This is a boring movie. Nothing happens. It sounds weird too. It's just, it's plotting. Like it's suspenseful, and it's, you know, that works to its advantage. It's in the same way that like the shark in Jaws is so effective because you barely see it. You barely see the alien, and it.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And I think for that reason, I've always gravitated towards Alien more than Aliens on like a personal preference list. Like it's knowing that Aliens is more fun, and there's more happens, and when more stuff happens in a movie, it's better, right? But there's something about the vibe of Alien that always sat with me better, and the production design, the sets, the loneliness of it all just feels so much more desolate. Mm-hmm. And in the sequel, everything is just notched up like crazy. It's harder, it's crazy, it's more violent and stuff like that. And I appreciate all that. And that's why I sort of like Alien 3 a lot in that it kind of split the difference between those two vibes.
Alien
but yeah,
3
I remember
is a better sequel to Alien than to Aliens. And
yes,
there's definitely a way you could do a sort of machete order there, where if you just scrap Aliens entirely and maybe do some recutting, and you're like, who is this man's torso in this spaceship? You're like, you know, you have to fudge a little bit of what happened to Aliens, but you could theoretically have the end of Alien where, oh, by the way, we're going to spoil the shit out of Alien movies. You haven't seen them. What's wrong with you? Go watch these great films. You could have, you know, Ripley launching her escape pod and then winding up on, you know, Fiorina 69 or whatever the planet's called, the space jail or whatever. And it's a straight line from there to there. And like the thing that sucks about Alien 3 is, you know, it's hard to go. It's going from Alien to Aliens, where suddenly, you know, it's having one dog, and then it's the dogs from A Christmas Story. Then going back to one dog is kind of a step down. Like thematically speaking, it's like I don't really know what Alien 3 again. That's a story for another day. But Alien the original is such a, like, I read the making of Alien by J.W. Rinsler is a phenomenal book. Like, this dude does amazing behind the scenes books, and it's one of my favorite, you know, it's one of my favorite nonfiction books, period. And it goes into such wonderful detail about how this movie should not have gotten made. This movie should not have happened. It is a freak of nature. It is on par with Star Wars in terms of just threading the needle of complete right place, right time, lightning striking, etc. Because you had all of these bits and pieces of things that did and didn't happen at the right times. Like, I mean, it's up there with, I guess, anyone's conception, anyone's existence is a miracle in the sheer amount of odds working against them for that to happen. But Alien, a lot of that is kind of a weird byproduct of Jodorowsky's Dune movie, which never materialized. But it was, you know, connecting H.R. Giger, who did the monsters, with Ron Cobb, who did the spaceships. And, you know, you've got Ridley Scott, who's coming off of his first movie, The Duelist, which is about dudes in powdered wigs trying to shoot each other by candlelight, which is not exactly, you know, commercially friendly fodder. And then you've got, was it Ronald Shusett, who was one of the writers, and then Dan O'Bannon, who's like the bow tie wearing Poindexter, who's like, aha, an alien in space, who had made Dark Star with John Carpenter, which is weirdly a prototype for Alien. It's about, it is beat for beat very similar, but it's also goofy as shit and clearly made by a bunch of dudes. It's
fun as hell, yeah.
Yeah, it's made by a bunch of dudes like smoking weed behind a warehouse and then coming inside and spending $75 on tinfoil to make a shitty, you know, sci-fi movie. And it's great because of that. I think John Carpenter has disowned it, but it's also, you know, you gotta walk before you can run. What's cool though is seeing how the bones of that made their way into Alien. And meanwhile, you know, you've got Giger brought in, like, it's a bizarre super group of just completely all these people from different walks of life. You've got Ridley Scott, who's like a very, you know, kind of artsy fartsy, you know, extremely talented director who's got a clear idea. And at the time, you know, sci-fi movies were not a thing people did. Like, Star Wars paved the way for this in a big way. And it was like Alan Ladd Jr. at Fox, who was the executive, who was like the young hotshot, like, hey, we should give these young dudes some money to make some spaceman movies because they're doing some crazy shit with spaceman models and rubber suits over in the warehouses, you know, behind the scenes or whatever. And like, then you have, was it Walter Hill, who directed the fucking Warriors, was one of the producers on Alien. Like, he's one of the main.
Another amazing movie. Please watch that if you haven't.
Basically, you have a bunch of people who do not like science fiction coming in to make a science fiction movie, and they make it so good because of that.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the secret sauce, right? Like I think there's this modern ideology that's like get fans to direct it, and it's like, well, no, I mean get people who are really fucking good at something to come together and make something new. Like that's I think there's a lot of, and we saw it with Andor recently, where it's like, well, this is you know, this is Tony Scott. He's not necessarily like oh, who shot first, you know, but he's like, oh, I know how to make cool shit, and this looks like a fun world to play in. Like tapping Giger specifically for Alien is like one of the most brilliant moves ever made. Like to get somebody with such an iconic visionary art style, like an aesthetic that's unlike anything else.
A fucking weirdo. Like
immense weirdo pervert.
Swiss vampire. Like he's so do you ever see Shadow of the Vampire with Willem Dafoe, which is like it's a fictionalized making of Nosferatu, imagining if the dude who played Nosferatu, Max Schreck, was like a vampire in real life, which is kind of a fun concept. I feel like if you took that and kind of just, you know, find and replaced Nosferatu with H.R. Giger and the making of Alien, it's kind of a similar deal. And I've talked about this before, I think in our episode about skeletons, but H.R. Giger demanded real human remains to work with when he was sculpting the alien. And everyone's like, yeah, all right, man, whatever. And he's like, he's showing up. Like, goths weren't a thing in 1979. They did not exist yet. That was a thing that kind of, you know, rose to prominence in the, you know, in the 80s, more or less. But like Giger was this weird dude in all black with little pointy boots who came in looking like he hadn't slept in 2 weeks. And he was like, I want to make an alien. I need 14 human skeletons. And I mean, like, it's just such a gross movie. Like
it really is. I mean, there's the amount of practical. I mean, it's almost all practical effects, right? Like, and matte paintings and stuff.
But there's like the shit that literally went into that movie. Human remains to make the alien.
Oysters, yeah.
3-day-old seafood. One of my favorite anecdotes about this movie is the scene where they're dissecting the face hugger. Ridley Scott went down to the fish market like 3 days prior to shooting that scene and got a bunch of oysters and scallops and, you know, mussels or whatever, just a bunch of seafood, and then brought it on set and arranged it after it had been sitting out for like God knows how long, and it smelled fucking horrendous. And so all the actors who were like wrinkling their noses at that scene, they're not acting.
Right.
And then, you know,
they're genuinely grossed out on their own.
Like, yeah, and like the chestburster scene where like you had I forget his name, the dude who gets the chestburster out of him. He was like stuck in this weird apparatus trying to get it right for like, you know, days on end. He was just stuck in this goddamn weird body cast thing where he's half hanging underneath this table, and they were just like bringing him like pear brandy. So he's just like getting loaded because he's just like sitting around waiting for them to like time this spring loaded puppet to get it right. And then, God, like when they actually finally pulled it off, oh my God, what's the other woman on board besides Ripley? She just like she just loses her balance. She like the chest burster scares the shit out of her so much she just eats shit off the back of a couch and just like beefs it. It's in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's the kind of shit that they were just doing over there. I
think that's what tapped in so well to me specifically as a kid was I loved horror movies. I loved monsters. I loved creatures and stuff like that. A lot of those were very, you know, and we did a whole episode about monsters, but a lot of them are very like sort of traditional in that it is, you either enter where this creature lives and it kills you, or it enters where you live and it kills you. And here in Alien, you had a bit of both. But what they did was added an extra layer to it, where the creature comes from inside your body and explodes out of your fucking chest, and then grows big enough to kill everyone else. And that was one of the things where it was just like watching that scene originally and not like having seen it in Spaceballs, you're like, oh, that's funny. He didn't do the dance, right? He didn't put the hello, my lady. But finally seeing that movie at a friend's house, and seeing that scene for the first time and being like, oh, it's weird to experience this through parody first, but also it doesn't take a single thing away from it for me, because it is still shocking and horrifying and disgusting. And it made me for a very long time, like in the same way, you know, Jaws makes you afraid of swimming. It made me like scared of like stomach aches. Like if there was anything that I was just like, oh man, I'm having like a pain in my chest or my tummy or something like that. Like if you ate too much as a kid or whatever, you stayed up late eating, mega warheads, or, had 6 bowls of Count Chocula one Sunday morning,
Apparently
and you got that stomach ache.
That scene was, or that beat in the script was inspired by Dan O'Bannon he had to, I think, go to the hospital because he had such a bad stomach ache, and he'd had a Big Mac, and he had like undiagnosed Crohn's disease and was in such bad pain.
Oh my
And
God.
he was just like, I'm going to fucking die. And he was like, stomach aches are kind of shitty. Let's put that in the script. Let's work that in there somewhere.
But it's the sort of, it's the middle part of what is like a truly incredible life cycle. And it's something that's fully, it's fully realized. It's fully visioned. Like they basically said, like, we don't want, like, I think if Alien was just, oh no, the alien's here, and it's just like a big xenomorph comes in and eats people, you're like, yeah, okay, like, I get it. It's just it's a big monster, right? Like it's really no different than the fucking Wolfman or Dracula or something like that, right? But the idea of it starting as an egg, and obviously this is a lot of this. I mean, it's wholly symbolic of the menstrual process and the cycles of a woman giving birth and having her period, all this stuff, right? But like an egg that hatches, and then out of that egg comes a fucking hand with a tail that fucks your mouth. Yep. And then that thing lays an egg inside you that explodes, that creates this 2-eyed snake puppet fucker that then grows super big and then lays eggs of its own. But in the process of that, also occasionally will just pin a couple of your friends up on the wall in part of a big nest. It is so incredibly inspired and creative and different than anything we had ever seen at the time. And truly, like, in terms of like movie monsters, like nothing is really on that level still, right? Like I don't really, there isn't so much of like, there's either like, oh, it's, there's Godzilla, there's baby Godzilla, there's a little Kong now, like baby Yoda. Like we have all these, like, it's a tinier version of the thing you have, but this, being several different forms that are all threatening in different ways, and then building up to a queen in the next movies eventually is so fucking cool, man.
It's awesome. No, there's a scene that got cut from the original infamously. I think it's in the director's cut, where basically they find somebody in a cocoon and they're just like, kill me. And the idea that like the alien was taking people and like, taking them off and cocooning them. And I feel like this is something that Romulus sort of connected the dots on, which I like, where it's like, and the thing that I was always like, well, where do the queens come from? How does that even work? And it's like, dude, learn about bees. Like they just, it's like the frog DNA in Jurassic Park, where like life finds a way. Yep. Like presume, and again, fake space animals, not real, but there's plenty of, stuff to point to in actual nature to be like, oh, that's that. Why couldn't it, if the alien has fucking acid for blood, surely it could, become a mom if it wants. It could just, one of them can be like, I'm the queen now. No, I like, it's a phenomenally disgusting. Like as an adult, as a grown up, there's a level of like body horror to it, and you can appreciate the sort of the more nuanced aspects of the life cycle and how gross it is that this thing, which again is like a whole top to bottom allegory for like sexual assault. There's a sense of violation. It is not a coincidence that the fucking xenomorph looks like a big penis, but like there's that. But then if you're a kid and you see an action figure of this fucking thing in KB Toys, it's still really scary. Yeah, like, and I think that's a really cool, like, this movie could totally have been like, I mean, you could have had this movie without a monster. I feel like it could be like an infection of some sort. Like there's a level of like, you can have this, similar beats happening. You could have this story told without a spaceship. There's the structure of it is like the kind of core story there, aside from like Xenomorph and spaceships and all that, is pretty adaptable, and it could kind of be done wherever. But the fact that it's like in this completely fictionalized futuristic world, like truckers in space, it's this whole like novel aesthetic, and then it's intersected with this alien, which is like completely alien. Like it looks fucking horrifying. Like it's like the derelict spaceship. You can't even figure out how that's supposed to fly. And then thankfully Ridley Scott showed us in Alien Covenant or whatever, which is like, I didn't need an answer to that. I mean, the what's so unsettling about Alien is it is exactly that. It's alien. You don't understand where it came from, why it's there. It's a perfect organism and it's there to kill you. And then we got 2 movies explaining where it came from and why it's there. And I'm like, that's all right.
I grew to appreciate them in their own way because they go hard in different directions, but they always answered questions I never asked.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is like, it's not questions I never thought of. It's questions that didn't really interest me to begin with. And I think like, that the franchises have a tendency to do that when they go on for too long. But Alien as a franchise has had a lot of weird ups and downs, but I think the fact that like it did become a toy line that both of us fell in love with growing up is so fucking cool, because it's like, watching the first movie, you're not really like, wow, what a toyetic film, right? It's these sort of bleak minimalist sets. It's a lot of violent personal deaths. It's not really a ton of like gun heavy action figure. Like you get all that in the sequel, right? But the original movie is like, it is quiet and sad and lonely and fucking terrifying. It's genuinely scary. It's the kind of thing where it's like, my kid is going to turn 7 this year. I have like slowly turned up the dial while looking back and cackling, showing her different movies. She got to see Die Hard over Christmas break, like she's seen Gremlins and stuff like that. Alien for me feels like a long time away. Like that still feels like, I'm like, oh man, what, 9, 10 maybe? Knowing well, I saw it probably way earlier than that, but like, it's still violent. It's still horrifying. It's still genuinely fucking scary. And the ones that came afterwards, have notes of that, but they're a lot more sort of fun and crazy. They're more action heavy.
Sure.
And so, yeah, that's one of those things. And I think like movies have been like, sci-fi movies specifically have been trying to replicate what the original Alien has done for decades now. And I don't think any of them have really accomplished it on the same level, right? Like every couple of years you get some movie about a derelict space crew in some lonely environment and some horrible thing comes on board and ruins everything, right? But it just feels like, oh, well, kind of like Alien, right? Mm-hmm. Alien was so definitive and so unique in its approach to stuff. And a lot of it is like what I outlined, just creating an entire life cycle for this creature rather than just airdropping a guy in a rubber suit and going, rah, right? And so like, that's what's always so special to me about this movie. And like the fact that it started it all makes it for me, like probably my favorite film of the franchise.
Again, I'm always torn on that.
Yeah.
My exposure to this franchise at the same time, like, I was scared shitless of Aliens. Like when my first interaction with it whatsoever was I was coming out of a movie in probably, this is like a core memory here. I was coming out of a movie and I saw the poster for Alien 3. So it must have been, 1991 or something. I was probably seeing like Rescuers Down Under, something like that. And I saw that cool, the spiral snake eating its tail chestburster logo. And I was like, Mom, what's that about? And she goes, and, God bless her, trying her best to, soften the blow. She goes, that's a movie about a guy who swallows a apple seed and a tree grows in his tummy. And again, I have like very faint memories of like probably running out of bed at night. And like my mom was having people over for dinner and I came out like, Mom, I'm scared of Alien. And they were like, what did you do to him? Like, what did you show him? And so at that time, of course, I'm seeing ads for this thing on TV and I see the Xenomorph for the first time. It scares the shit out of me. The toys start showing up in stores and I was scared, completely shitless by those two. And I was also intrigued. And I went to, I was at a, summer camp, day camp thing. And there was like an older kid who was like a counselor or whatever, even just like an older kid. I can't remember. And, he'd seen all of them. Like he was like the cool kid who'd, seen all these movies. He even saw the new one. And so I asked him what they were about. I was always like, I don't want to watch them. I'm too scared, but tell me what happens. Cause I want to know. I'm curious. And so he proceeded to basically give me beat by beat, like spoiler cast of the entire trilogy, as it was back then, and demonstrating certain scenes with French fries and ketchup. So like, when he's showing me a chestburster, he's like taking one French fry and shoving another one through it. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah. And then at the end, like Ripley has to jump into some lava or whatever. He's like dropping it into a big pile of ketchup. And I just like, for that to like still be scary says a lot about,
it says a lot. Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, it also made me kind of homogenize these movies thinking they were all like similar beats, and also assume that, Ridley Scott was by definition a sci-fi horror director.
Right.
And I remember being like scared of the idea of Blade Runner by proxy because I was like, oh, it's from the director of Alien. Oh no, that's too scary or whatever. And like, I remember when True Lies came out, it was like from the director of Aliens. I was like, ooh, but why? I don't understand.
Does something explode out of Jamie Lee Curtis's chest?
Yeah.
I mean, the scene in Spaceballs is scary.
Yeah, that scared me too.
They go to like a diner after they've done most of the movie already, and they're like, all right, wow, that was a great movie we just did. And then a guy gets sick and his stomach explodes. And I remember being a kid and being like, that is a messed up thing to show me, man. Like, why would you, like, I just saw 2 hours of like a dog that eats out of a bucket and can talk. And I wasn't disturbed. There's like a golden gnome that lives in a mine that sells merchandise. Like, a lot of weird stuff in that movie, right? Like there's a huge robot that sucks and blows. But when you show a kid like that part, not only was I not like, wait, I don't get it because that's not from Star Wars. I was like, what the fuck, man? Mm-hmm. Like that, like, so even in the goofiest, like you could do a, Al Jaffe mad margin drawing of the chestburster, and a kid would be like, it's fucked up. Why would you show that to me? I'm just trying to read Spy vs. Spy.
There's an Animaniacs where one of them shows up.
Yeah.
And it's mimicking the first time anyone in the movie gets killed. It's when Brett he's looking for the cat and he's wandering around and he's like, oh, Jonesy, whatever. And then there's the drip, there's like dripping water on a spaceship, which always seemed like kind of funny to me. Like they make it like a cave and there's chains jingling. And I just remember, like, I think it's Wacko who's like, I don't know what they're doing. I haven't seen Animaniacs in a while, but like the alien just comes down, and the joke there is that its mouth pops out, and then a smaller mouth pops out of that, and then a smaller mouth pops out, and then I think it like Wacko burps at it or something and scares it away. And that scared me. It's fucking Animaniacs. It still scared me. I thought it's a scary ass monster. Like you can.
We used to scare each other at school. Like this, me and my friends were so big into Aliens. When the toys were out, the comics were out, there was books, novels, all this stuff, that we used to do that thing where you put your hand under your shirt and we'd run up to each other in middle school and just be like, "Ah!" and like, pretend like you're getting a chestburster, just chest hatch or whatever, just pushing through your t-shirt. And you just walk up to people and you'd be like, "Hey man," you put your arm on the shoulder, be like, "Yo, what time do you have gym?" Like, "Oh no, I gotta," and just like, it just became a thing. 'Cause it's it's ultimately a really fucking cool action feature, but also it's one of the most terrifying and horrifying things ever. Alien was weird for me because I had only seen Winona Ryder in Ghostbusters. So
Sigourney Weaver.
I'm sorry. I got confused. I meant to text this to you the other day, but I was at I saw what was it? Aliens Resurrection Winona Ryder action figure.
Oh yeah.
Mint in box the other day.
I wonder why nobody bought that.
It's such a hilarious likeness because she just has this like Harry Potter haircut. It's very funny. But no, Sigourney Weaver I'd only seen in Ghostbusters, so I was kind of like, why do they keep messing with this lady? Like she's always at the end of something dealing with some sort of horrible monster, right? And I didn't know it was like, oh, she has a storied career in theater and comedy and all this other stuff. Because as a kid, I was just like, oh, she shows up to these movies and then they do horrible shit to her. I don't know why she keeps agreeing. I didn't know how movies were made. But man, she fucking owns that film. Like that is one of the most incredible performances in a movie period. I'm not even going to say by gender, by a genre, by anything, just in a movie period. Like, and I will say and even better in the second one, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like the second one is just on another level for her. But
we could definitely do a whole episode about the second and the third and the fourth and maybe not the fifth, but yeah, I mean, Sigourney Weaver, I love it because her real name is Susan, but she was in an acting class and there was another woman named Susan Weaver, and she's like, fine, I'll be Sigourney, and swished her scarf over her shoulder or whatever. Like, I love how theater kid that is.
And it's stuck.
The thing that's really cool about the Alien script, and everyone's always talking about it's being woke, putting the gender, whatever, blah blah blah. The script for Alien is written. Everyone has their last names. Like, it's never specified who is what sex or gender or whatever. Like, it's just like, here are these people. It doesn't fucking matter. They're all just up there doing space trucker stuff, and they're all going to get killed by a big PP. Yeah, Sigourney Weaver, she was definitely that was her big breakthrough role. She was really green there. She thought that she was going to get fired because she found out into shooting that she was allergic to cats. or it was like a combination of the glycerin they were putting on her to make her look sweating, and the cats, and they had to pick 3 different cats to play Jones to have like basically, I don't know what the deal with like cats on film is. I don't know what the some union.
I mean,
thing
they're
for pets
probably
or-
assholes. They have
Yeah.
like long riders of
Yeah.
like, you know.
Well, her
different
logic was like, I'm
bones that
relatively
you eat.
unknown, and they cast 3 of this cat, and those cats are all fine, and everyone else on this set is on this movie is extremely experienced. They're not going to get rid of them, but I'm going to get fired because I'm allergic to the cats. It's like I'm not working like my body is not working well with these other pets or whatever. I think they eventually figured it out, but like there's just I don't know. There's so many weird little anecdotes about the making of that movie.
There's a really good and you've probably seen it, but I just watched this a couple months ago. On my sort of run up to Romulus, I rewatched the first. I rewatched all the films actually, but I rewatched the first 3 with commentary. And if you get them on iTunes or obviously DVD, Blu-ray, whatever, but the director's cut on iTunes has the option to watch it with commentary from Ridley Scott and Sigourney Weaver, and it's really awesome how much they remember working on that movie. Like it's the kind of thing where I don't, you know, I couldn't tell you what happened at work at my job in 1998. Right. But these guys can remember like vividly
God, yeah,
being on a set, you know, from a movie from half a fucking century ago at this point. So like, it's special. And I think that like sort of they, like you mentioned how like it shouldn't have been made, right? And I think that like while they were making it, I think people started to realize like something's happening here. Like we're on to something, right? Like this is special. This feels good. And so like I feel like there's a lot of magic that happens with movies like that where, you know, maybe there's a lot of doubt and uncertainty going in, but once it starts cooking, they're like, oh fuck, this is something. Like we're onto something here. And it's true. Like it's, you know, you mentioned how they didn't really give much thought into the backstory about a lot of the characters and their names and stuff like that. Cause I think they were just sort of fodder. Right. And now 50 years later, like, you know, you're like, I want a toy of him, or like, I'm going to dress up as him for Halloween. I'm going to, you know, I want a poster of that one, or this one and this one. Like all of those names became a big thing. All those characters became iconic, and it's so fucking cool. Like it's so cool that this, like, that piece of art has endured and led to toys and comics and books and
you
sequels.
mentioned the first movie not being particularly toyetic. That didn't stop Kenner back in, you know, 1979, and they made I think they made one Alien figure that did see the light of day. And I think it was just so, like, parents were like, no, what are you doing? Get that out of here. And they were like, oh, okay, fine. Let's pack it up. We'll be back in 11 years though. Don't you worry. We'll come and get you.
They made the, like, sort of like the 4-inch or 3 3/4
so they
scale.
didn't make those. They showed off 4-inch figures. And again, this is a Fox property. This is hot on the heels of Star Wars. Star Wars was a huge commercial success, and the toys were a big part of that. And presumably Fox was like, yeah, they both got spaceships, they got aliens. Get the kids the 4-inch figures. Give them the big boy. Get the big chap out there, the big greasy alien.
The big chap.
Give
I love
him a tube of KY jelly. Slather him up with it. Make him look like a real slime ball. And then I think they showed off prototypes, and people were like, no. Fuck no, this movie's too scary for children. Don't do that. And they were like, oh, fine. We'll put a pin in it. But yeah, then, you know, Aliens is like, yeah, they all get pulse rifles and a tank and a robot suit, and it's all different spaceships and stuff. Like, I get why that got action figures.
There's like one of the I forget which one. Is it Bishop has the action feature where he like just falls apart? Like
so the Scorpion alien is like an incredible crash test dummy, and that's the closest one to just like a basic warrior alien, and you push a button and he just explodes. I don't think the funny thing about the Aliens figures, and again, we got to talk about Aliens another time. That's we could definitely go long on that one. I love Aliens so much, but the action figures are also optimistic because they were like, here are toys of people who died in the film. If you have not seen this film, don't worry about it. If you have seen this film, don't worry about it. Here they are. They got even more powerful weapons, cooler t-shirts. Everything's fine. They're doing great. And that was almost a cartoon show, but it wasn't. The thing I love about Alien is that throwing Ridley Scott at it, I think set a really cool precedent, because here was this relative unknown commercial director who has, sky high ambitions. He's this artsy fartsy motherfucker. He's very much a working director now, but back then he was like still, he was, I don't know if visionary so much as just like, he was just like, I'm going to make some cool shit. I'm going to get out there. And I think he sort of got wind of this project and he was like, I'm going to go see 2001. He went and saw 2001 and he was like, all right, so spaceships, let's work with that. Let's do some cool shit. Those are cool. They're too clean. Let's gunk them up a little bit. Let's do what do like truckers in this universe look like? Let's get grimy. But it's neat because like the Alien franchise since then has been almost like, it's almost like an anthology of different directors. You know, you've got Ridley Scott, you've got James Cameron, you've got David Fincher, who up until that point had only done like Madonna videos basically and commercials. And then you have Jean-Paul Jeunet, who did fucking Amelie and the City of Lost Children. And then it kind of gets wonky at the end. And like, I wish that, like, I like Alien Romulus because again, it's throwing some green young director at this property and letting them play around in that sandbox. And I think that's what I don't like about Prometheus and Covenant is that it's just Ridley Scott kind of going back to this thing that he obviously has some attachment to, but it's probably like he probably wants to make, a movie about some 600-page history book he read in between playing tennis and smoking cigars. Like it's, he's not, I feel like a different wavelength from a lot of people, but there's there's generations of people who grew up with these movies and have like, I don't know, like I would be curious to see what like a Denis Villeneuve Alien movie looks like.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that like it's also like some of the sequels sort of lost the focus of like what the Xenomorph is and why it's cool, right? Like it's just not having like a big fucking dude.
I mean, I want to see what the TV show with Noah Hawley's doing. I'm really curious.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Because like it's Alien Earth. Earth, what a shithole, as Ron Perlman puts it so succinctly in Resurrection. Like and again, it's set before Alien. Like, I don't know. There's so much stuff in here I do not like the sound of. I do not like the idea of, but I also like Fargo is one of my favorite TV shows ever. And I will give Noah Hawley the benefit of the doubt. And I think it could be really cool, but it's also a TV show. How do you take Alien, which is a very tense, 2 hours or something like that, and then make it into a very tense 8 hours? Like, does that work? Does that translate?
I don't know. I mean, like I love Andor. I love Skeleton Crew. I think like if you had told me, 20 years ago, like, hey, how do you take a Star Wars movie and turn it that long? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? We'll see. It could go either way. But yeah, I think that like the fact that people do still get to play around in this world, that we got Romulus last year, which, it has its issues. But it's also like, it takes a bunch of big creative swings too. And it goes hard in unique ways, just like the original does.
The thing I like about Romulus is that it makes use of that, the beautiful aesthetic of the first movies.
Yeah.
Like it actually, it has interesting sets. It has interesting background that feels like it's, it very much is making use of that cool used future space. Whereas like Prometheus looks like Lost in Space. And, Alien Covenant has like, like the costumes in Alien Covenant piss me off to no end because like there's so many great costumes throughout the series. And then they're just like these dudes in ponchos. Like it just looks like they went to REI and their guns are like regular ass assault rifles mostly. Like they don't give them any cool, there's nothing, I don't know. Meanwhile, like Alien 3 is like very stripped down, very minimalist. Like they're all like monks on a prison planet. And that works more. That's more interesting to me. Like I feel like to go almost futuristic, there's a time and a place for that, but it's not Alien.
Yeah.
Like Alien needs to be inherently unfamiliar in multiple arenas. Like it's got to be anyway. I
will say real quick, the face hugger to me was always this thing that was sort of like, kind of ancillary. It wasn't necessarily like a thing. Like I didn't like the idea of it. Right. And it was always sort of like, well, that's gross, but like what it does, the byproduct of it, hugging your face is horrible and it's way worse. Right. And then, we worked with a company last year to do a branded video for Alien Romulus, and they built, a pair of functional face huggers that were like movie quality basically. And they were remote controlled, and they basically had a breathing tube in it, and you could pump them to make them inflate and deflate. And I had to do this shoot where I wore one for probably 45 minutes, and it had like a valve jammed inside my mouth, deeply uncomfortable, incredibly claustrophobic and suffocating. And I was like, okay, you did it. Like you made the one part of these movies that I was sort of like, always thought was cool as hell looking, but was never really like, well, that's not the scariest part. And you turned it into the scariest part. So fucking great. Thanks. Yeah. Now I have like this deep fear of like a face hugger jumping on my face, hugging and holding on. That was a really fun, deeply uncomfortable shoot. And I'm glad I got to do it. Because it probably made me get over some fears, but also definitely gave me new ones.
Yeah. No, the facehugger was always odd to me because it's like I should be more scared of that thing because I'm immensely arachnophobic. I'm not crazy about snakes. Genitals are kind of weird in general, and this is like a combination of all those things.
How? What are your thoughts on suffocation?
Yeah, just a little bit of I don't know. It never bugged me that much, and I think Romulus really kind of scratched that itch. Where like, oh, what if there's a fuckload of facehuggers running around all willy nilly and they're creepy? I love like have you ever seen the Carlo Rambaldi alien design?
No.
So he's
I don't think so.
Italian effects guy. I think he did E.T. I think that was his big thing, or he's done a bunch of shit, but he's, he did work on Alien, but he put spikes on the head, which wound up making their way into the Warrior Aliens and Aliens.
Yeah.
But like there was this weird kind of like, Giger designed this thing and he made this shit and he made this, Giger's expertise was not making special effects or costumes. It was designing this monster, making it scary. And Rambaldi was like, I'm going to make it my way. And he put like all these spikes on it, make it like a little bit, it just doesn't work as well. Like he fiddled with it a little bit. It looks more like the pizza aliens from the Ninja Turtles cartoon, like where
which are very funny. Yeah.
Which are obviously based on too. Alien. Yeah. And it's just an almost, and it's kind of an odd, like you can do so many, you can adjust that design just so much and it stops working immediately. And one of the key things is don't give it eyes. Like it can't have eyes. It's got a skull under there. If you look real close, you can sort of see some eye sockets, but it's so much more effective when it's just like, I don't know where it's looking.
I got a really awesome, I think it was SH Figuarts Big Chap, I guess, a couple of years ago, action figure. And I was like really disappointed that when it showed up, it had a translucent top of its head and you could see the skull underneath. And I'm like, I don't like that. Like, it's not that it's scary to me, it's that it's less scary. Like a thing not having a visible skull or eyes or anything like that, and just having this like weird, obelisk, this polished dome coming at you with huge teeth, like that was always the selling point to me. So like I went in with a Sharpie on the inside and it looks way better now. And I don't know. It's one of those things where you're totally right. Like if you tweak that design too hard, and obviously, and we'll talk about this in a later episode, the toys did that a lot and they did it to varying degrees of success. Some of them were really fun. Some of them are really fucking stupid. The gorilla that squirts water.
I really want somebody to just do, okay, facehuggers got loose in a space zoo. What now? Mm-hmm. There's the unused William Gibson script for Alien 3, which has xenomorph lemurs in it.
That's so weird.
That's a thing. It's not a thing, but it could have been a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, the Alien universe, there's a lot of movies in there we'd love to talk about, but Alien, the original rules. Go rewatch Alien. Also, if you've never seen it in 4K on a really good TV, it's the first time it'll look unrealistic.
Yeah.
It's weird. The second you can see the dry brushing on all the shit in the background, it's just suddenly like, oh, wow, that looks like a set.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, it looks, the fuzziness does it a lot of favors, but it's still a gorgeous movie.
It's impressive. Watch the 4K version after you've watched it on the worst TV you own. Like watch it on, like, if you have an old CRT somewhere in the basement that you and the buddies play Smash Brothers on or whatever, watch it on that. Not to say it looks better there, but there's just something about it that makes it feel not like found footage, but it makes it feel like it's something that happened for real.
No,
maybe it did.
Definitely true. No, the whole part where it pops out in the vent. Mm-hmm. When you're squinting to be like, what's going on here? You can't tell what's going on. It just feels like you're much closer, and it's gonna get you.
Yep.
But yeah, love that xenomorph.
Love Alien. Alien rules.
Before we go, just a big, huge thank you to our producer pals over on Patreon: Ben Burkhalter, Kevin the Mesurier, Steve Cam, Josh Page, Donald Cole, Caleb Hilliard, Billy McKendry, Chip Chunkling, and Scott Davis. Thank you all so much for your support.
This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.